we recording?
We are recording.
In the new studio in Hafnar.haus.
Correct.
Today we're gonna talk about collective movements and collective initiatives we've been to in our lives. This is kind of interesting thing. We've been talking about it many times, and also we were participating in our collective initiatives, like, one into another. So right now we are in Hafnar.haus, and this is something very interesting that is happening, something very new that is happening in Reykjavik. But yeah, I would like to tackle with you this history of why it's fun to do things together and what are the thoughts behind it.
Mm-hmm. Well, when we say collective movements, I think, of course, everything that human beings do pretty much is a collective act. So everything we produce or make or create is in one way or another a result of a lot of factors, and many thousands of human beings have somehow contributed to it. I think the best way to understand it is that, if you are doing something, could you have done this in the Stone Age? If the answer is no, it most likely means that you are part of a collective thing that is being produced because of the society is enabling that. So, in some way, all spaces and movements are collective, but perhaps what distinguishes collective movements is that they are consciously collective and recognizing the collective aspect. Yeah?
Yeah, or moving the means of ownership in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
And towards the equality, towards maybe more democratic decision making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was the question?
That was just an intro to how we can tackle this this problem.
Yeah.
Probably we will talk from our experience of the history that of the things that we've been doing, how it started, why we've decided to do something with other people, not alone, why this is fun. Is it fun?
Yeah, again, you are bound to be doing something with other people. It's impossible to do anything that doesn't involve other people of any substance. I guess it's a question of, do you want to share the ownership or the decision making, or what kind of a relationship do you want to have with other people? Do you want it to be a relationship of employment, that you are hiring other people or you're being hired by other people? Do you want it to be a transactional relationship where you pay other people or are paid by other people to do something? Voluntary, or some sort of a democratic format, or equal cooperation? I think that perhaps if I start, I think maybe the first kind of consciously collective thing I did that wasn't directly just politics was like a filmmakers cooperative that we founded called CLAP, which was 10 years ago. I think the answer to why I was wanting it to be something of a cooperative was found in another discussion we had, which is around exploitation and who is doing what for whom. And I understood that to do films and create art without having a really good commercial basis or access to funds. You needed to rely on each other. And my idea was that to do some sort of a cooperative would be the most natural way to work together on doing those things.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like I had pretty recently, I had an interesting conversation with an artist, and she pointed out, is it even a sense? And we are talking here in like about cooperatives or collectives in the area of arts and art production, right? Like I put filmmaking in this box, like art production. And she pointed out that maybe it's useless. Like, can we rely on those collectives? Those are such a short beings. And I completely, it's not like I didn't understand. I understood her point. But it's like, why we are thinking about those collective movements as something that have to stay there and produce and do something and just be there for a long time.
But was her idea that collective movements are not there for a long time?
Yeah, that you cannot rely on those because it's like, people are together for a year and they are going apart. And I'm like, this is the point. Like, we should admire those short moments of collaboration, or maybe it's also good to put some points what we're gonna do together, what we want to achieve, and then how we want to go apart, how we want to release this energy in like other initiatives, or what are the ways to escape this kind of situation.
But I mean, this is a little bit one step ahead of me, because it's not obvious to me necessarily that collective movements are just temporary. I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it's true, but I don't know why that is assumed.
Maybe for me, this is coming from, my thoughts that it's so hard and it's so hurtful for some to just finish a work of a collective. Maybe this is a cultural thing, I don't know. When we collect some means around what we have, what we are doing, around our, art collectives are very often a brand. They are, more recognizable after some time. And then it's hard to go apart, or people feel a lot of regret, just splitting up. And for me, it's like, maybe I'm in a moment in my life that I want to appreciate that some short-term things or limited time things, you can take some particular lesson from that, or it's just good to end things in a good way, and in a good time.
Yeah.
Before it die out.
Yeah. But it's also a fact that most things that are started die out. That applies to not just collective movements, companies or associations, or not everything lives for a long time. And I don't know exactly what is the thing that keeps that characterizes things that live for a long time.
And what is long time? For some, a year and a half, that can be a long time, right?
Yeah, but I understand in some way that there is always a lot of energy to get something going and pushing it forward and getting it to move and getting the habits built up and credibility. So I think for most serious sort of organizations or something that has a bit bigger purpose, 1.5 years sounds like quite a short time. And if you are constantly starting something new, then then there is a lot of wasted energy there. So
it's called a startup.
Yeah, but definitely there's a lot of wasted energy in startups, and that's maybe one problem with startups and the way they are organized, like startups as in like company startups, that for one reason or the other they don't necessarily work, and then they just are just despondent, and a lot is lost of connections and knowledge and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what are the what collective movements do you have in mind that you are trying to tackle and wrestle with, having been short-lived?
Oh, collective movements. It's such a big thing. Like, I am afraid of this term even. Movement has a big scale, or movement has something that is going somewhere and it's not stopping, or maybe it's transforming in something else. And movements are connected with something we believe in. So it's like, it's so vulnerable to talk about it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's why I'm like, it's so much easier for me to use the term a collective space, a collective place, a group that is doing something together. But,
okay.
Maybe we can...
What are some of the collective spaces that were short-lived and you're coming to terms with having been short-lived?
Oh, like, So you see, that's why this is so vulnerable, because we are talking about some values, some qualities that we are producing, or people are deciding to be in a collective and work towards creating some collective movement. And for example, in my life, it happened to be workers-run workers cooperative. It was called Fractal, and we've met in the time that Fractal was set up and was having a part of its planned activities. And that was something that...
Cooperative, but also it was a co-working space.
Yes. Right. One of few in Reykjavik. Also, this is such an interesting thing that in Reykjavik always you have a group that need a collective space or a co-working space, because there are always some people that need a desk, they need an office, they need a creative place to play with and to invest in and to spend some time in, maybe meet another people. Mm-hmm. And I'm still using the connections that happened to start there, just because we had some place and some other people were coming to it, and like we couldn't control and we couldn't plan what kind of people are gonna appear there, right? So that was nice. And also it was heartbreaking when we had to decide, when we collectively, democratically decided that, okay, we don't have any more power to run that, and we don't have enough power to fight with all the things that were happening like around this space, like the plans, the fact that we couldn't build exactly what we wanted there, like exactly a vegan cafe that we agreed on in the beginning. So but I also feel that it was like a great opportunity just to have something for yourself as a group. Mm-hmm. And it would be, I don't think if I will ever do it as an individual. No. I wouldn't have this motivation. I wouldn't have all of those ideas around how it should look like, how it should run. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I'm always asking you about this, remote experience in Thingeyri, because it's nice to go to talk about some phenomena from the point of like the small limited area, or like this experimental place that is like very limited when you have few people, and you are trying to find places that are alike but in other remote places. So if you want, can you talk a little bit about Blue Bank? or initiatives around.
Yeah, but what do you want to know?
Okay, maybe I made a thesis, like, in this question.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should just ask you, like, what did you need being there in Tingeri, and why did you start to contact other remote places?
Okay.
Was it a collective movement of local initiatives?
So, as most of the audience will know, Þingeyri is like a small and remote place. And usually there is a dialogue, whether it's through just people cursing silently at home, or an actual dialogue between the small places and the big places. So there's the questions around, what does Reykjavik have? Is Reykjavik doing enough? Or, do they care about the small remote places? And then there's a question about, from Reykjavik side, are the small places just leeching on us? So there's a relationship, and there's a look mostly from the small places to the big places. And realizing, partially through getting into contact with some guys from a town in Japan called Kamiyama, but also others, that the same sort of problems of out-migration, of skewed demographics, of an industry that used to dominate everything but was not there anymore. There would be the same problems in these small remote places. And that was a relief in some way, because it means that there's nothing wrong with us. It's just everybody is dealing with this. And then realizing that maybe in order to kind of constructively work with this, there has to be a dialogue between the small places, and not necessarily just like, the small village in Spain and Madrid. But maybe the small village in Spain and the small village in Poland and the small village in Iceland have more in common than, comparing themselves to the big one. Mm-hmm. So it is finding like a common ground and common interest, and finding common solutions. And kind of not necessarily seeing each small place as one small place that is insignificant and can do limited things on its own, because innovation is hard, it requires a lot of resources. You're not going to do any app to solve the problem of one small village. So it's kind of necessary to become a global village, to connect to others, and to kind of collectively, if you wish, tackle something together. Because when you look at the world, even if half of the the world's population is now living in cities, there's still the absolute amount of people who live in rural areas is still growing, because the population is growing in general in the world. But, they can't be comparing themselves to the cities. They need to find a common center where they are the center, and they are the normal. Not like the city is the norm, and then the small places are somehow trying to catch up with the city. Mm-hmm. But, we are in the middle of Reykjavik right now, and, this is many years ago.
Yeah. But it's also like, it's a way of, for me, it was an evolution of those local initiatives. Like, everything is local. What we are creating here, it's very local. Because, like, we, Hafnar.haus happened to collect so many creative people in one place.
Yeah.
And from day one, everything what is happening in here, it's local. Mm-hmm. Like, people like me are thinking about, like, okay, what kind of knowledge can I share with this group of people?
Mm-hmm.
What is gonna work for them
Mhm.
and better their working conditions or living conditions?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, affordable office place. This is like from day one. This is improvement of
Mhm.
people's lives and a big resource, right? And from then on, we can plan what to do with this huge resource and potential of people, of tools, of spaces. Like the fact that we have this room in here, this is such an improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can use it in whatever way. So this is kind of example that you have a minimum of means. Like this is a place, a space you have people in,
Mm.
and things are happening.
Yeah, things are happening. That's a good. I mean, a question about community in general, and I don't know if there's a definition of community, but it has to be sharing something, I guess, and the places makes sense.
Time makes sense.
Time and place.
Time in
Yeah.
general, like, you know, in COVID we've learned to be everywhere all the time. you
Right.
know. It's
Yeah.
just a common time that you can meet
Okay.
and, for example, talk
Yeah.
or whatever.
But I guess you can have a community that is not place-based. You know, you can have some stamp collectors all over the world who are all joining together online, or you know, even through letters in the old days, or meeting up regularly. So it doesn't have to be place-based, but it's sort of an obvious thing in some way of uniting us. And in a case of Hafnar.haus, there is the office space, there is the facilities, and they are somehow the thing that the stuff gathers around. You know, you come for the office space, but the hope is that it ends up being a lot more, and you know, there are layers on top of that basic service. But then, of course, you need to have some sort of collective values as well. You know, you need to have a common direction or a common ethos or something that you share together. And that's not obvious what it is, and cannot be also created from above.
For me, it's very important that it's a space that is kind of common for the people that were very separate because of their occupations. Those are mostly freelancers, those are mostly artists, people that are just, you know, left by the world in a way like, you are such an individual, deal with everything yourself. And like, you know, if you have a space that people meet in this, like, oh, I was so alone. And we were all so alone in the past years.
Yeah, maybe that's we can circle back to the point about the small places, in that in realizing that what you're dealing with, it's not just you. So it's not because you are unorganized or not good enough in this or that. When you see the same things in other people, you shift into a different mode of thinking, and you're thinking like, what can we do about this? And you know, there are very few things that are purely a personal problem, really. You know, there are individuals who are just horrible, and they just need to be dealt with as individuals. But most things that we are dealing with are a collective problem. But we're not necessarily conscious of it, or acting as if we were conscious about it. Or that the fact that it is a problem for someone is as much a reflection of society as it is of that person, with a few exceptions of just horrible people that just need to stop being like that. Okay, so perhaps a place like Hafnar.haus can allow people to come together and experience each other's situation and experience their situation as part of a whole.
Maybe we can talk about opportunities, because, you know, we are both in this place, like meeting people doing our stuff, like, on our own, using those facilities. What are the biggest opportunities for you in this space?
I think that the biggest opportunities in this space, in some way, they are all micro opportunities. Like, people are meeting and they're doing some project together. I think the biggest opportunities are that of some collective action. So, for instance, it has been very interesting to get to know a lot of small games development companies. And there's an interesting discussion going on that relates to this. So there are maybe not a complete alignment of the interests of the big game companies in Iceland, which see themselves as an industry and are lobbying very much as an industry and for the kind of subsidies and support that benefits people who already have a lot of money. And this is not necessarily aligned with the small companies that are approaching the thing as art. So just seeing lots of those game developers having a conversation around that, and then mixing that with having a conversation with people who are researching the creative industries and are finding similar attitudes from the kind of big game development companies. So maybe there's an opportunity to have a conversation about this and think about possibilities of acting around this because we are here together. Something like that would be very interesting. Something like maybe critically reflecting on what the creative industries are in Iceland. They are like extremely concentrated around 101, for example. The art salaries are just mind-bogglingly homogeneous. And there are some things that it's interesting when you run a place like Hafnar.haus. There are some things that you get asked about a lot from maybe people who are related to the project, like the gender mix. Like, you get so much asked about that. What's the ratio between men and women? And by the way, it's like 50-50. But that's also great that people are aware of it and are thinking about it. But there are other questions that are not asked, like the prevalence of people who come from, I don't know,
outside of European Union, for
instance. Yes, that's one thing. Or within, just Eastern Europe, for instance. That's a very stark. As you know, there's like 20,000 Polish people, I think, in Iceland. In the first batch of applications, there was 0 from Poland here. So it's interesting. Like the ratio of Polish people in Iceland is coming closer to being like the ratio of black people in the United States. And if you had a house full of 150 people in the US and a single one was black, it would raise a flag immediately. So it's just interesting how we are just, all of these perspectives are valid, but definitely some perspectives are just gained some sort of a legitimacy and others not. And maybe getting people together in Hafnar.haus can be one way to like have a hard look at us of like, what is this? What are we doing? Who are we? What are we about? And for whom are we doing this?
Exactly. Yeah, you are covering everything that I wanted to add. So
should we press stop then?
Oh.
No, I have a habit of just
like that. I think we will conclude it in a way that the opportunities and future. Maybe for me this is also interesting how people are holding space here. and that they are going outside of their offices also. Like, to showing themselves, to presenting. I really love this idea of studio visits that we have every Friday, because it's an opportunity, maybe first time in a long time or lives of those kind of workers, because I'm treating freelancers and artists as workers mainly, because they do something. To present, to talk about themselves, and I'm so glad that they are doing it in such an open way, and that they are thinking about like why the place is safer in a way, why it's comfortable for me to speak to those people. And I think those things are happening in the conversations around, so I'm very, very happy to see that.
Yes, but I mean, we are also have been open in Hafnar.haus for like 4 months, so it's very much the honeymoon kind of phase. And I think we should not end this video without a pessimistic streak to it, which is like, why do these collective endeavors fail? And if your friend is correct that they are like they're short-lived, which might be correct, and then why is that? And so I think we need to be like negative now, and we need to like use some of our own experience to figure out what goes wrong.
Oh, you want to use my
No.
negativeness? No.
Well, yes.
I can.
I mean,
like
we can both.
gentrification is coming. Somebody will find more profitable use of this building.
Okay, wait. Let's.
Bang.
Oh, that's a great point. But to make it more abstract, I guess it is that the collective movements generally have values which isn't profit, which makes them vulnerable to others that do have those values. So that's one great point. Like, why does it fail? It fails because it's not set out to grow and defend itself.
But when we are talking about values, maybe that's going to be on positive point here. But yeah, maybe this is it. Like, we are not dealing with economical values in here, or this is different kind of economy. Like, we don't have to produce money to have a value. And valuable, value created for the community outside, for this building to be like, an important point on the map of Reykjavik. Yeah. But it's so vulnerable, yes.
Yeah, because whoever has the money has a means to kick you out, because we live in that kind of society. But okay, one way to defend yourself is to attach yourself to some political, stronghold or whatever. The project is obviously supported by the city, which is renting the building out really cheaply to the organization running this. This can change with some political things. I mean, another thing, but that is also because we live in a social system that really prioritizes money and like the financial power, and you can always any other type of power is always vulnerable. Another thing that I've thought about maybe is like ownership and responsibility, and whether perhaps as a society we're like weak on those things. So in a traditional kind of company or for-profit entity, there's like an owner who has interests in guarding this and safeguarding something, like the metaphor from the neoliberals is this: they have this shepherd for the flock. And I suspect that, unfortunately, there's some truth to it, that maybe as a society that has been, dominated by capitalism, it's hard to get people to treat a collective entity as something that's, needs to be defended and protected and nurtured and so forth.
Yeah, because the law is also not leading you in a way how it can work, because there is no law about cooperatives. There should be one owner and maybe a board, but you cannot make a legal collective in Iceland. Like, there are some examples how you can do it, but you have to know the law, and it's like, it's so complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably definitely one point. But what I'm also thinking about is just how do you get people to clean their coffee cup?
How do you get people to be safe around themselves? Like, not to harm themselves. Maybe this is like, for me, this is something that, because I am also a feminist self-defense teacher, I know that this is a threat. Like, people are asking about the ratio, like gender ratio, because people feel better when there is no 90% of male in the building, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, so I hope nothing wrong will happen, and people will be conscious and people will be open for critique also. But I hope nothing wrong will happen before the collective will create some policies around it, like, how to deal with a problematic situation, because it's going to be problematic for everybody.
But that circles straight back to my point, because we had a members meeting, for instance, here, and we had a discussion around this, and we thought, okay, there is a potential of something happening, some aggression or violence or harassment,
There is always potential, because violence is everywhere.
Yes. And then we also discussed that because this is not a workplace per se, in the sense of, like, it's not a company. So it's 150 people, but we don't not have like an HR department. Exactly. We don't have middle managers. At that point, it was just 2 guys part-time. And so what we can, fairly be asked to do can't be the same thing as you could ask of a company that has all those resources. So we, some people raised your point about we need to have some policies before something happens. Some people had some experience from the other sectors. The conclusion was to get some feedback from them of how it has been done in the past. Even if I tried to reach out to the same people who were concerned about this to get this information and feedback and so forth, nothing came back. So this is also what I'm getting back at. Like, as a society, we're just not that good anymore in participating. Yeah. In just taking responsibility and stepping up, and like, it's so easy to criticize. I'm not talking about this particular one, but other things. Like, it's very easy to point at something and say, this is bad. It's infinitely more hard to actually participate in making it better. And it's always going to be a struggle, but I suspect this is the single biggest reason why collective movements fail, is simply because, the 1 or 2 people who really were the ones doing everything, they burn out.
This is a big problem, yeah. Bottom lining, getting things done, not only deciding, but really performing.
And then, when you're one of those 1 or 2 or 3 people who are getting everything done, you ask yourself, why the heck is this a collective movement? Why I'm not just the owner of this? Yeah. Why shouldn't I just own this if I'm doing all the work?
Or I've never wanted to be an owner, why I am doing this?
Yeah. Or like, hey, we will all come together this morning and clean everything on this floor because it's a mess.
And who's gonna come?
There's the 3 female members who are gonna show up, and everybody else is not gonna show up.
And it's so true.
Yeah. And then these 3 are gonna be like, well, why am I cleaning this kitchen when everybody's using it? And then we're going to be like, okay, everybody's going to start to think their bottom line. And then might this not just be a totally commercial place where we just pay somebody to do this? And it's a real question. I don't know the answer to it, but it's sad. But I really, I feel like perhaps, at least in Iceland, I think that people were more, used to collective movements and used to participating and taking responsibility and stepping up and delivering. I just think it was part of the culture, more part of the civil society, which has been weakened.
But maybe it's a way, it's for sure, it's good to open the discussion about not being invisible, about creating a space, place, group when you are not invisible, so you are participating, so you are doing, and you want to be a part of it.
What do you mean, like not being invisible?
Like it's very, with this participation thing. Like people think that they are not counting, that they are invisible, that whatever they do, like it doesn't have a meaning, what they do, what they say, nobody will listen to them. And maybe it's also a part of responsibility, taking over, taking space. Also a question about ownership, You have to feel that, okay, this place is mine, I have to take care of it.
Yeah. I think for me, the single, in all of these experiments of collective movements or like startups or whatever, I think there's a single criteria that I have personally developed as my sort of a method, which is just, if you show up, I will listen to you. If you don't, I won't. And there is always this person that never showed up except at one time to complain. And then they never showed up after that. And these people should not be listened to. They should be sidelined. And that's part of democracy and inclusion, is that you cannot also allow somebody who isn't willing to step up responsibility to hijack the process. So I think it's like you need to be aggressively exclusive in order to really have some sort of a fair and balanced inclusive thing. And and also like when you open up with meetings and digital spaces, and you allow committees and you allow everyone to have a say and stuff like that, without that individual responsibility, it's just also spirals into pettiness and unimportant bullshit. That's often more about the personal sort of feelings of the person who's raising it. Are we gonna air this?
We're gonna have this.
It's all true. It's all
Is
true.
Yeah.
People who want to know about collective movements have to know this, and I know that you know this.
It's hard.
It's hard.
It's hard. When you have enough, you have to quit.
Well, I mean, I haven't had enough yet with Hafnar.haus, but
it's just the beginning. We will see how it's gonna go.
Yeah, it's all gonna go. As far as I'm concerned, it probably will blow up at some point. But so I'm just figuring out when it will blow
and how.
And how.
But maybe this is a part of a fun with collective initiatives and collective movements that we don't know where they're gonna take us. But maybe this is the thrill.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure. I'm pretty sure Hafnar.haus is gonna be fine. Not sure about me, but it's also. Who cares?
This is the conclusion. Thank you, Arnar.
Thank you, Anna.